Darlene Carman, and welcome to the show. On this show, we are honoring all the veterans who have served in the Army, Navy, and Air Force. A.E. Conran's first middle grade novel, The Lost Celt, received a gold medal from the Military Writers Society of America. She is a children's book specialist, freelance editor, and a middle grade mentor for Pitch Wars. Hey, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Nice to meet you.
Congratulations on
Thank
your
you.
gold medal. Let's see that.
Yeah, here we go.
Wow, that's lovely. Wow, gold medal.
Yeah.
And so explain this now.
So the Military Writers Society of America are a group of people that got together who like to create a community around stories based on military adventures and military situations. And so they like to review military books. And they have a special judging system. And so there's not always a gold medal awarded, and sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't. And it just depends. So they have a whole set of criteria for judging and reviewing books. So I was very, very honored that, that they gave me a gold medal. It meant a lot to me, especially to be judged by veterans or people who are in veterans' families.
And they probably don't give out very many awards.
They do a special awards every year. They have awards every year. So,
well, congratulations.
Thank you
I think
very
that's
much.
wonderful. I love your story, the way the dialogue in the story, very contemporary, and then it moves to ancient times. It's just wonderful the way you have a knack with words and using modern phrases that we hear all the time with our kids, and then all of a sudden it switches to the ancient times. And I understand that you have a little bit of things in common with some of the characters.
Yeah, I think so. As a child, I was very, very interested in history, and I think as a lot of kids, I was very, very influenced by certain books, and one of the books that I absolutely loved was The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. It was the first book that really made me love reading, and I remember that feeling of opening that book and walking in my mind through that wardrobe. And for me, history was also magical like that. I wanted to be able to walk back into the past and see what the past was like. And so my main character, Mikey, he has this obsession with Romans and Celts. He's really fascinated by them. And it may be a little bit like me. As a child, I was completely conflicted. I loved the Celts, but I also admired the Romans. I could never decide quite which one I wanted to be. And so I also, I played with Romans and Celts all the time. I was very, very interested in them. And so like my main character, I loved little soldiers. I made little soldiers. I painted little soldiers. I think there's a few of them there.
When you're talking little.
Yes, they're really little.
This is the smallest little tiny little soldiers that I have ever seen.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
I used to love them, and I would paint them, and I would put them all over my room, and I would have, you know, battles and so on. I was obsessed with any book that had a sword on the front, any book that had a warrior on the front. I absolutely adored. So I pulled on a lot of that for my main character, Mikey. But I also pulled on my son, who has inherited this, but he also loved playing video war games. But also he has dyslexia, and so my main character, Mikey, he's a very, very clever boy, and he's totally into history. He does take all of this stuff on board, but he finds it very, very difficult to put things down on paper. And so I have this combination of a young boy who's very intelligent, loves video war games, loves everything about history, and yet when he has to do a Veterans Day report is very, very afraid because he finds it so hard to get things down on paper. And that combination has been really interesting because I get a lot of parents and a lot of kids who really recognize that feeling of knowing, you know, of being so interested and yet finding it so difficult to put that over.
Well, something else, time travel.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, time travel again. I just absolutely, I wanted to be able to time travel so badly. So I wanted to put that in, and so the whole story was kicked off for me by some friends who work at the VA emergency room, who did actually discuss one night the fact that on certain nights there were more people, more veterans would come into the VA. And that were certain nights, it was because there had been something in the news that had triggered people or so on. And it made me realize that there are certain parts of being triggered when you have post-traumatic stress that is sort of like a time travel, that you are being taken back to times that you don't necessarily want to.
But you know, now that you say that, it's very, very true. It is a lot like time travel. And so you bring that out in a very colorful way. You had a lot of role models in England that kind of help you shape your vision. So who were these people?
Well, you know, part of the reason that I was so interested in this book was that I realized that when I was a child, I lived in a very small village, and we did literally have veterans from the First World War that were still living in the village that I could speak to. We were surrounded by veterans of the Second World War. And of course, my parents, as children, had gone through the war. And so we were surrounded by stories of returning from war and what that was like. And it was very influential, I think. We were brought up constantly with this awareness of war all around us. And so
I have a picture.
Oh,
here.
right.
I have to show this picture. I just thought it was so cute. And here you are as Cleopatra.
yes.
Tell us about this costume.
Oh,
Who
right.
made it?
Well, my father made that for me because he knew that I was obsessed with history and I really wanted to be Cleopatra. And so he spray painted all of that for me. And I was so, so proud of being Cleopatra. And so, yeah, so I was really, really interested in that whole historical situation. And it made me aware of the fact that we were surrounded by these stories. And of course, that in our modern wars, there were so many people that were giving so much, who, in a sense, were isolated from the rest of us, and that felt very uncomfortable to me. So that was partly why I wanted to address this issue in this children's
Well, you
book.
knew some of these people in England, or were you too small? You just heard about them from other relatives, people that came from the wars and so forth? Were you too young for that, and you just heard about it through relatives, or?
No. I mean, you know, yes, a lot of it, certainly the First World War information I heard from relatives, my grandma. You know, sad stories. We had a great uncle who sadly was so desperate when he was coming home to visit his family, for having been in the trenches, that he was just arriving at the train station and he jumped out of the train too early and sadly died of his wounds from the train accident because he was so desperate to get home. So there were stories like that, and my great uncle, who was only 15 when he joined the First World War, you know, joined up to be in the First World War. And then when he had got his Distinguished Service Medal because he'd commandeered a tank, he always said to my grandma that he wasn't brave, he was just angry because his friends had been killed. So there were lots of stories that we were brought up with. And then as a child, yes, there were still veterans from the First World War in our village.
Well, let's see, I have another picture here.
Yeah.
And this, both of the, is this your grandfather?
This is my grandfather, yes. So he was in the Army Physical Training Corps in Britain. And so that's him as, I believe, a sergeant and then later on as a major. So he was a career soldier.
Very handsome.
Yes, yeah. It's one of the few corps where there are no commissioned officers. You have to go up through the ranks. So he started up as a private and went through.
Nice.
And
Very
so he
handsome.
travelled away a lot of the time. He travelled a lot in Africa and Palestine and all sorts of places.
And then, of course, your father.
Yeah.
And you have one here of your father. Also a very handsome man.
He is, yeah. So
And
that's my
something
dad.
about in uniform.
Yeah.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
It's
So yeah. So that's my dad when he was in the National Service, and he nearly went on to become a career soldier himself, and in the end decided to be an artist instead.
Oh,
Yeah.
really?
Yes, he did.
Oh.
But he was in the reservists when I was a child, so he was on the reserve list for a long time.
So you really did come from a background there. So that, when did you come here?
I came here 20 years ago.
20
Yes,
years ago.
20 years ago.
But you visit. Now I know that
I visit every year.
yes, you,
Yeah.
you just came back, in fact.
I did, yes, yeah. My dad just had a total, a full hip operation, so.
How's
yeah,
he doing?
He's doing really well, thanks very much, yeah.
Well, a lot of things that you did before, or maybe in preparation for the book, or just to get it up here in your mind, you visited a lot of historical places. So tell us a little bit about where you visit. Hadrian Wall, I remember that one.
Yes, yeah. No, when I was I was very lucky when I was little. My parents took me to Hadrian's Wall, which is a wall that stretches across the very top of England.
It's just a wall.
It's just a wall, but it has it's a big wall. It's a long wall. It goes from one end of the country to the other, and it was built by the Emperor Hadrian in around 148 AD. And there's a mile. Every mile there is a fort, and these poor Roman soldiers, many did come from Italy. Many were conscripted from Gaul and other places, but many did come from Italy. And they were on this really cold, wet, damp wall guarding the very ends of the empire, and it's an amazing place. And when I was 8, we actually visited Vindolanda, which is now a major fort, but and a major museum, but at the time was literally a bunch of sheds in the middle of nowhere. And I remember going through the mist, seeing this fort, and as we arrived, people were shouting, and they'd found a Roman sandal, and it was right there. I could see them excavating this Roman sandal, and I was so excited. It was the most extraordinary thing, because it was history really alive right there in front of me. And I was very lucky because actually in our village, and in most of the villages in my area, there is a Roman villa somewhere. It's hidden, you can't see it, but it's under the ground. And so every time the fields are plowed, yeah, it's under the ground. So, and every time the fields are plowed, bits of the villa will come up. And so as a child and even as an adult, you can still find Roman remains. So these are called tesserae, and they're actually very small pieces of mosaic tiles. So this would have been these are tiny tiles, and they would have put them together in a pattern to create the mosaic floor. So this is brick. This is some sort of local stone, and actually this is sandstone. So a lot of the yellow color.
You have three different colors here.
Yeah. So you can just find those in the fields as you're walking along.
I think you have a bigger piece too.
I do. Yeah. This is a Roman roof tile.
Oh.
So that would have come
authentic.
Yes.
This is authentic.
Yeah. So we're very lucky in Britain. You can find this stuff all the time, and they have something called the Portable Antiquities Scheme. So you can actually tell somebody that you have discovered this and report it, so that they know where it's come from.
Somehow I have a piece of, what do they call it? I don't know. This big wire thing. Oh, where's my husband when I need him? Anyway, it's a piece of the Golden Gate Bridge.
Oh, right.
I don't know why
Cable.
I have that. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
What do I know about bridges?
Yeah.
Yes, I do. I have a piece of cable, and I don't even remember the story on how I got that, but I'm very proud of it. I don't know what to do. eBay, no. No. Well,
yeah. So I was very
precious.
lucky. We were surrounded by this all the time, and it just piqued your curiosity on a constant basis.
Well, without giving too much away, can you tell us some about the Celts?
Well, yes. I mean, the interesting thing, and this is something that I tell kids when I do presentations, is that the story of the Celts is that you must always tell your own story, because the Celts were fascinating people, but they didn't write anything down, or very rarely. They had one writing system, but generally the people that kept all of their history and their religion, the Druids, they did not write anything down. They believed everything had to be remembered. But this means that most of the information that we have about the Celts we get from the Romans or the Greeks, and they were their enemies. And so a lot of the information we get, you don't want
to be a little twisted.
It's going to be a little bit twisted. Although we're realizing that more and more of it was accurate. But the Celts were extraordinary people, but we only hear about sometimes their more warlike sides, and not some of their well, they're more gentle. I mean, they were amazing goldsmiths. They really made the most beautiful gold and precious objects. So something like this torque, for instance. So the torque was a signature piece of jewelry for anyone in the Celtic nations. And we don't really know what it signifies, but men and women would wear these.
And women.
And women. This is are based on one called the Snettisham chort. So this is a replica of one that's in the British Museum, which is made of pure gold.
Oh.
This is made of brass, and you can feel
But
how heavy it is.
heavy.
And it's actually smaller than the real
How do
object.
I dare? I would, but my mic would,
right, yes, you have to put it right around your neck. But they had incredible skills in, you know, metal working and so on, and decoration.
There's one, you have a really, I don't know if we can get a picture of the Celt over there, but he's wearing one. But, you know, along with wearing the torque, he had the bright red hair and the mustache and the tattoos. What's all that about?
Oh, right. Well, there, one of the Greek writers said that, that particularly the noble Celts wore very long moustaches. So they would actually have very long moustaches, and the joke was that that would get into their food. And the Romans were very clean shaven, and so that was, you know, they would judge a Celt by that. But also they were known for sticking up their hair with lime, so they would make their hair completely stick up when they went into battle. Maybe that was because they had a goddess called Epona, who was a horse goddess, and so they were imitating the mane. But it was really to make themselves look ferocious. But the Celts were, you know, they were fascinating people because they had a very individual style of fighting, which didn't go so well against the very disciplined Roman army. But they were considered fearless, and the Romans were very, very afraid of the Celtic way of fighting. But a lot of the Celtic fighting was actually that they would try and scare their opponent. So in fact, you didn't actually have to go to war. They would have champions who would fight each other so that the entire tribe was spared because just two people fought out the dispute.
I remember listening to you. That was way back in February.
Yes.
Talking to the children. They were mesmerized by listening. So do you think that they were exposed to this part of history in their class before you came to visit, or is this really taught in school? Of the Celts?
It is, and so 6th grade, very often you do European and older histories in 6th grade. So up to 4th and 5th grade, not so much. But children are fascinated by these sort of histories. And the really interesting thing is that we've always felt that the Romans were, you know, the superior civilization in many ways. But we're now reassessing the Celts completely and realizing just how amazing they were. You know, they invented chainmail. They had chariots with incredible suspension. They even had things called equiranda, which was where, like a telegraph, they could shout to each other from long distances and get messages across the whole of France, the whole of Gaul, very, very quickly. So they were really incredible people.
I like the way you talk about in your book. You kind of explain their mode of operation for battles, whereas the Romans like the big, you know, chariots and the big deal, and the Celts they're champions would fight instead of the whole big battle. Is that pretty authentic? That's pretty.
Well, we believe so, and there are stories that were written in medieval times, but probably hark back to Iron Age, especially in Ireland. The stories of Cuchulainn, the Irish warrior hero, and he really is a Celtic hero. And yes, he was a champion. So boys and girls were very often in the noble families were trained to be warriors from a very young age. Yes, they hoped that they could become a champion. It was a very important position. And there are actually jokes that the Romans make as well. They say that for the Celtic tribes, if you actually started, I hate to point to my own tummy here, but if you started your tummy started going over your belt, that was actually a punishable offence. You had to pay a fine because everybody, yes, it was important that all the nobles were able to fight and prepared to fight and kept fit enough to fight at all times. So yes, the Romans actually used to mention that.
Is it true that a part of the proceeds from the book goes to the veterans' charities?
Yes, it is. So the Lost Celt was actually 60% funded by a very small group of Desert Storm veterans who were interested in the story and wanted it to be told. So very kindly they donated money to make sure that it could be published, which was wonderful. And so, of course, yes, we wanted to donate back in thanks for that. And so 20% of the the funds do actually go back to
great.
veterans charities. And I'm lucky enough to be able to discuss with my publisher who that might be, you know, and we talk about groups between us and then decide who to donate to, which is, yes, I really appreciate being able to do that.
That's really nice that you do that. So you've been selected to be a mentor for pitch wars. Now that's kind of new to me. So let's explain what the pitch wars are, and you know, talk about your sponsor or whatever it is that you do, and also who you're mentoring.
Right. Yeah. So Pitch Wars is an organisation that was set up by a lady called Brenda Drake, and she's helped by some other amazing women as well. And it really is an opportunity for people who haven't got agents and editors to be put in a position where they can actually pitch to a whole group of agents and potentially get contracts. It's really exciting. And what happens is that people can apply to mentors. And so they have mentors in lots of different children, so YA, middle grade, and adult now. So you can apply to be a mentor. People then send in their manuscripts. They send in 10 pages and a pitch. And you have, you know, 60, 70, 100 submissions. And you have about 2.5 weeks to sort through those submissions, read them, and then actually pick one person.
So you select.
Yes.
Being the mentor, you get to
Yes.
select. So if I looked it up a little bit, and so they can apply to particular mentors.
That's right, up to 4 mentors for their submission. And then as mentors, we sort through them, and really we're looking for one submission that we really fall in love with, that really sings to us. And it's really exciting, and so I have actually got a mentee now. You work with them for a mentee.
Not a manatee,
no,
a mentee.
No, mentee. And you work with them for 2 months to try and improve their manuscript. It's very intense. People put a lot of effort into it, and my mentee really has done that. She's called Colleen Bennett, and she's writing a very, very funny middle grade adventure story called Canada or Bust. I fell in love with the characters. There's a character called Hollis Fitcher who desperately wants to be a pro wrestling legend, even though he's only 11. And he just made me howl with laughter. I laugh out loud. I've read it 3 times now, and I laugh out loud on every page. I love the book. So tomorrow is the big day when the middle grade people pitch. So we put a pitch out, we put out the first page, and we hope that there are requests.
So this is online?
It's online,
it's all
yes.
done online?
So if you look at pitchwars.org.
So people, it's closed now. So
it's closed now, but it happens every year.
And it's called Pitch Wars.
Pitch Wars.
And
yes.
it's only been around for like 5 years or so?
Yes, but every year, I think there's probably 7 or 8 or probably more people who actually get either their agents or contracts through that organization. It's really wonderful.
So
and
you don't have any part of that part? I mean, you review it and you try to help with the writing?
Yes, I help with the writing. So you read the whole manuscript and you give comments on the entire manuscript, and then we discuss what changes, and then the mentee will send the changes back and we rediscuss them, and really try and get it in the best shape possible. So it's really exciting.
Very exciting.
And it's a lovely way to give back, because anyone who writes a children's book recognizes that it really does take a village. It takes a long, long time, and you're relying on critique partners and friends and family and the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators and conferences that you go to. There are so many people that help you in your book that it feels only the right thing that you want to help other people as well. And we all want to get the stories out there. We love our stories, and we all want to get them out there. And I feel that we're serving our readers to try and get as many stories out there as possible, good, high quality stories.
Is she local?
No, she's in Georgia.
Oh, I was going to say, well, maybe when she's finished with her book, perhaps I could read it if it's published, and we could have her on, but I didn't realize, oops, she's in Georgia.
Yeah, so we've been Skyping a lot. We do a lot of Skyping. And Google Hangouts and whatever else we need to do.
I still would like to read it.
Yeah,
you never know.
I think you'll love it. I just love this book.
So what is your connection now with the Book Passage?
All right, well, I've been working with Book Passage for about 4 or 5 years now, I think. And I work there
in Corte Madera?
In Corte Madera, yes, the one in Corte Madera. And I work as a children's book specialist. So I have a few roles. I'm lucky enough to support their book fairs by going into schools, and I talk about all of the books that I love every season, all of the books that I really think the kids will enjoy. So it's a lot of reading, but I get to book talk. So I'm going tomorrow actually. I'll be talking all morning. So I talk about all the books that I really love that I think they'll enjoy too. So I do that. Then I'm lucky enough to have a couple of book clubs. So I have a book club called Ink, which is a group of 8 to 12-year-olds. And
You started this club?
I started,
Ink.
Yes. I didn't actually start it. Somebody called Sue Campbell started it quite a few years ago, but I took it over. And we went from being a more traditional club to actually deciding that we wanted to write our own books. So now we plot a book, and over the course of a year we plot it, we agree all of the chapters, and then the children go away and they write their own chapters based on the chapter summary, and they illustrate, and we end up publishing a book. So here's the first one, Dragon Mist. And the lovely thing is that, again, the money from these books goes to the Giving Tree, which is a charity that Book Passage runs, where children who are not likely to get books at various holidays and so on, they give them books.
Oh, how
so
nice.
yes, it's really lovely. And so we then have a launch party at the end of the year. So every child gets the chance to read out from their chapter and share. The book that they've written,
Well, maybe I could read this.
So, I hope so, yeah. And we're on the third one right now. And then I've actually moved that on. So I have graduates from that program now who are wanting to write a YA book. So they want to write a book about World War II, women in World War II.
Oh, we're running out of time.
Yeah.
But I do want to just quickly show this last picture we have. That's probably, am I on the right one?
Yep.
Oh, good. Okay, so your next book.
Yeah, so my next book is another war-based book. So this is actually my husband's grandfather, Dennis Conran, and he was in the First World War. And we are lucky enough to have copies of his letters and his photographs from the First World War.
So it's almost finished?
It is, yes. I'm actually
finished?
revising it right now.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah. And so it's based on a little boy who...
I just want to thank you so much for being here. I
thank
really
you.
enjoyed having you. And people out there, please give a moment to think about all the people that have served our country, and in the past or the present. And let's don't forget the families that are in the background that give their support and all of their strength. So thanks for watching the show, and we give them a lot of love, and you too. Could you please sign my book?
Oh, yeah, I'd love to. Thank you very much.
If we had a pen.
I do. Right.